God, the locations are only getting windier. I'm Peter Austin, that is an iron supplement tablet, and this is interesting. The longitude problem was a challenge faced by sailors for centuries in determining their east-west position. In the 17th century, when there was loads of maritime exploration going on and transoceanic trade was really kicking in, this was a major problem, and world leaders were offering monetary rewards for anyone who could solve the issue. But according to a pamphlet from 1687, there was no problem at all. Thanks to a very special scientific property of iron sulfate, all you needed to do if you wanted to work out your longitude while on an extended voyage is bring a dog aboard the ship with you that you had wounded with a knife before you set sail back in London. This is the very strange 17th century wireless communication method of the powder of sympathy. We often think of early sailors navigating by the stars, and while that was how they'd been finding their latitude for thousands of years, you could not use the stars to find your longitude. Instead, a sailor would need to be able to work out the time difference between noon in his or her exact location and noon at the prime meridian, or Greenwich, in London. Precision was absolutely crucial, as being out by just a few seconds could see you placed miles away from your actual location on your charts. And in an era where clocks were powered by pendulum, which, needless to say, don't work very well when you're rolling over the seas, you couldn't just bring a clock with you that was set to GMT. Okay, so we've identified the problem, but how do anemia tablets come in to the solution? And what was that about injuring a dog? Well, also in the 17th century, somewhere in the Venn diagram between old alchemy and brand new cutting-edge so-called chemistry, there was a bizarre claim circulating about green vitriol. That's just an old name for ferrous sulfate or iron sulfate, the main ingredient found in most over-the-counter iron supplement tablets. According to proponents of the theory, if you take green vitriol, dissolve it in water, and then recrystallize it by drying it out in the sun, it gains a remarkable quality. Reportedly, various types of wounds could be treated with the crystals you get from this process, not by rubbing it into the affected area, but instead by removing the bandages from the patient, placing the bandages into a solution of that compound, and that's it. You leave the bandages in it, you don't put them back anywhere near the patient, you leave them there, and that's it. English natural philosopher Sir Kenelm Digby is said to have demonstrated this to George Villiers, the second Duke of Buckingham, by treating the bandages of a man with a wounded hand, who claimed he experienced pain relief whenever new crystals were added to the receptacle where the bandages were soaking. Reportedly, the compound worked by sympathetic medicine, the idea believed by some of the scientists at the time that healing power could in some way be transmitted through the air. Now, it can't, obviously. Please don't go taking iron tablets if you accidentally stab yourself in the hand while chopping vegetables, but according to some 17th century sources, powder of sympathy was instead made from copper sulfate rather than iron. In fact, Digby himself reportedly favoured this recipe, and it is true that if you were to wash a bandage with this compound and then, crucially, place them back onto the wound, it may exhibit some antimicrobial properties, therefore fighting infection and aiding recovery. So it might be that this phenomenon had been observed at the time, but then just grossly misunderstood by proponents of the miracle powder. Whatever the origins, though, this belief in the compound's strange properties is what led to the theory behind how a sailor could be informed it was midday in Greenwich, even if they were hundreds of miles out at sea. Because, as with many kinds of alchemical processes and other sorts of pseudoscience throughout history, there were lots of variations and conflicting statements in the written material, and one such variation of powder of sympathy was weapons salve. The theory here was not that the compound should be applied to the patient's bandages, but that it should be rubbed onto the weapon that caused the wound in the first place. Seemingly, though, this did not have the same pain relief qualities that Digby's powder of sympathy had for the guy with the injured hand. It appears to be more like when you get disinfectant into a cut, like it really hurts, but you know it's doing you good in the long run. And that's crucial in calculating longitude when you're hundreds of miles out at sea with a dog. Let me explain the process. You stab a dog before you set sail. You bring the dog on the ship with you, but leave the knife behind in the hands of someone who has a clock accurate to Greenwich Mean Time. Then, every day at noon, that person rubs some weapon salve on the knife, and the dog on your ship at that moment will yelp in pain. Then all you need to do is work out the exact time difference between when the dog yelps in pain and when the sun is at its peak wherever you are at sea. And you've got your longitude. Fantastic. This is obviously ridiculous, but that's actually kind of the point. You see, in the 17th century, there were lots of publications concerning the apparent benefits of sympathetic medicine, but the one in which this supposed solution to the longitude problem featured was a satirical piece, despite the fact that the theory behind it was kind of accurate to what was believed by some brilliant minds at the time who were proponents of sympathetic medicine. And that's the point of the piece. They were scoffing at those people. This is the equivalent of modern-day scientists writing an article about how the spin of the flat Earth can provide some sort of health benefit. It's pioneers of chemistry putting each other on blast through the medium of 17th century health pamphlets. And who could blame them? Apparently, there was a similar theory proposed at the time by a sect of spiritualists called Rosicrucians that two people could get the alphabet tattooed onto their bodies, have that bit of skin transplanted between each other, and then communicate long distance by poking themselves on the arm with a needle. Apparently, person A could feel it when person B poked the bit of skin that used to belong to person A on their arm, and therefore messages could be written out, I guess, in their own minds. I don't really understand how it works. It doesn't work, is the point. Crucially, the longitude problem was eventually solved by self-taught clockmaker John Harrison, who developed a special timepiece called the marine chronometer. And as a result, there is no need for 21st century cargo liners or cruise ships to be sailing around the oceans with a poorly dog tied up in the bridge. I've been Peter Austin, and that was interesting.